Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people and the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. It's been just over a week since one of the worst natural disasters first hit our province. Our response to this emergency is still ongoing, and it will be for quite some time. With more rain falling in southern BC, including for the hard-hit Fraser Valley, we have to stay vigilant. While the rain we're seeing today is not as heavy as forecast, we are expecting another rain event this Wednesday through Friday, and a series of further storms are expected in the coming weeks. That's why it's so important at every level that we prepare for these events as best we can. For individuals, there's a lot of information available on our Emergency Management BC and Prepared BC websites and through Environment and Climate Change Canada. In the meantime, we will keep you informed of weather updates in the days and the weeks ahead. While the challenges continue, there is reason for hope. The Sumas Dike breach has been patched. The Barrowtown pump station is once again moving water into the Fraser River, and vital connections between the Lower Mainland and the rest of the province are starting to reopen. Non-essential travel restrictions remain in place for hard-hit sections of Highway 99, Highway 3, and Highway 7. The provincial response to this emergency is dynamic, and we are adjusting as needed. We have also expanded travel restrictions to cover parts of Highway 1 in the Abbotsford-Sumas area. Our focus is on keeping the roads clear for agricultural vehicles in the Fraser Valley. And I urge everyone to do their part and stay off roads if you can. Over the last 2 years, we've seen no shortage of loss and adversity, whether it's dealing with COVID-19, wildfires, the heat dome, and now flooding. And through it all, I'm humbled but not surprised by the overwhelming courage and generosity and the spirit of British Columbians. We will get through these difficult times by coming together as a province. Over the past week, thousands of evacuees have been supported through emergency support services. These are volunteer-led services, and I cannot thank them enough. They're doing an incredible job in difficult circumstances. They're providing important supports, including meals, lodging, clothing, emotional support, and information about the crisis and family reunification. We're working with the Canadian Red Cross to provide direct financial support to those impacted, and I will be able to provide a further update on that soon. Of course, we're continuing conversations and our work with our federal government partners on the ways that they can support. They are waiving normal employment insurance rules for British Columbians left without work due to the floods, and we're now asking for the 1-week waiting period to be waived as well. I also want to recognize the 100+ Indigenous communities and First Nations who have been severely affected by the flooding and the landslides. The First Nations Leadership Council has been unwavering in its leadership. Emergency Management BC is working closely with First Nations Health Authority and the First Nations Emergency Services Society to support hard-hit communities. And I know the First Nations Emergency Support Society is working to get more culturally safe supports into affected regions. The work happening with the Halalt and the Penelakut First Nations is a great example. All partners are working together with the Cowichan Valley Regional District to quickly assess damage and make sure that evacuees have a safe place to stay. This collaborative team-based approach is how we need to move forward. There's a lot of hard work ahead, but we are making progress thanks to the big hearts of so many people. For example, the 4 nurses and 1 doctor in Hope who were on call when disaster struck down the road. In other cases, medical teams headed straight to the danger area. With the help of police and CN Rail, a small team from Surrey Memorial was able to travel into the disaster zone and provide life-saving care. And we also see the power of people coming together in Abbotsford. When the Barrowtown pump station was in danger last week, hundreds of volunteers showed up late Tuesday night, ready to get to work. There are about 150 dump trucks working around the clock to repair dikes around the Sumas Prairie. Mayor Braun of Abbotsford estimates that more than 50% of the main breach has been repaired. Further east in Princeton, volunteers are going door to door to help with the cleanup efforts, and Fortis has restored gas to 1,150 homes in that community. with about just over another 100 needing to be reconnected. In Lillooet, the community's Friendship Center has provided shelter and warm meals for dozens of stranded travelers. And in Merritt, the water treatment plant is back online, and we hope that the community will be able to return soon. There are pockets of properties which have been flooded, and rapid damage assessments are happening now. It is vital, though, that people listen to their local authorities and only return when it is safe to do so. If there's flood damage to your home, ensure you're following all advice on returning home safely after a flood from your local government, EMBC, and the BC Centre for Disease Control. Over the last week, we've asked a great deal of British Columbians, and time and again, the people of this province have responded. We see it in the stories I've shared here today and in countless communities across this great province. Everyone needs to keep doing their part. Stay home if you can, so essential vehicles have full tanks and can clear the roads that they need and clear roads they need to do their jobs. If you need to go shopping, please check in on a neighbor to see if you can save someone a trip. People in border communities can also head south to pick up essentials without taking a PCR test upon re-entry. And when I say essentials, I mean food and fuel. I don't mean family trips or Black Friday shopping expeditions. I want to thank Ottawa and our neighbors to the south for working together to make this possible. In closing, I want to say this. It's more important than ever that we stick together. Now is the time for patience and compassion as we all come to terms with the scale of this disaster. The hard part of rebuilding is ahead of us, but I know we're going to be able to do it with the true British Columbia spirit that we all know we have. So with now, I'd like to turn this update over to Minister Fleming.
Good morning. I'm pleased to bring this update this morning on behalf of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Obviously, the topic of our updates has been around reopening vital highway corridors, and the substance of today is about that as well. Getting corridors open from the Lower Mainland has been and continues to be our highest priority to make sure that supply chains can be maintained. Crews have been working non-stop for the better part of a week now to make this happen. We now have 2 routes connecting the Lower Mainland with the interior and the north open for essential travel. They've been operating now for a few days. Highway 7, of course, connecting with Highway 3 opened Friday afternoon. This is a designated route for heavy commercial vehicles. Highway 99 connecting with Highway 97 opened on Saturday afternoon. Both routes are operating well, given that the context is far from travel as usual. We continue to urge, though, patience and safe driving for motorists, including being prepared for winter conditions. On that note, we will be adding some signage to the Highway 3 and 99 routes, further reminding drivers to slow down and drive with caution. There are work crews in the area, and these are congested areas that are still under repair and under active traffic management. It is reassuring, though, that the important goods that we all rely on are moving. And this is very, very good news. As we reactivate the supply chains, we continue to work closely with other levels of government, as well as many companies and organizations. Canadian Pacific, CP Rail, is cautiously optimistic it can restart operations tomorrow evening, barring any unforeseen events. So they are making tremendous progress on repairing track that will connect us right through to the Alberta border and with the rest of Canada. This would be a very important and welcome development for goods movement for our country, and we will update on the status of those track repairs and when service is expected to resume. Highway 1 Lower Mainland, on Saturday evening we opened the stretch of Highway 1 east of Chilliwack from Bridal Falls area to Hope. Traffic has moved well through there. This is an area that is not currently part of the travel order, but we are asking drivers to really consider whether being out on that road is truly essential. We do not want it to become congested. We are seeing some progress on the section of Highway 1 in the Sumas Prairie area near Abbotsford, in the immediate Abbotsford vicinity. Water has receded between Highway 11 and Cole Road, and we're at a point where we can reopen this road today at noon. Again, though, for very restricted use. As of today, the section of Highway 1 between Highway 11 and Yale Road near Chilliwack will be covered by the essential travel order. This will allow farmers and those supporting the impacts to agriculture from the floods to get back to their farms. It would allow emergency responders and vehicles to get in and do further repairs. And at this time, the most easterly part of that segment, the stretch of Highway 1 between Cole Road and Yale Road in Chilliwack, remains flooded, and we don't currently have an estimated time of reopening as of this morning. Moving to Highway 1 at Fraser Canyon, up towards the Fraser Canyon. Last evening, we were able to open Highway 1 between the First Nations community of Boothroyd and Hope. This now provides Yale, Spuzzum, and Boston Bar a direct link to the Lower Mainland. As with the other routes that have recently opened, we ask you to only travel, though, if it is absolutely essential. And drivers should expect delays. There are areas on this reopened part of Highway 1 that are subject to single alternating travel lanes, and crews, again, continue to work. So drivers must be very mindful of their safety. This road does not fall under any orders, but again, avoid unnecessary travel in this area, please. We need to allow the residents of these communities, some of whom have been unable to access supplies and medical resources since they were cut off last week. For the segment between Spence's Bridge and Boston Bar, crews are working very closely with the railways. Temporary repairs are getting underway, which is good progress. The temporary repairs to get traffic moving are also anticipated to take several weeks, and I'll continue to provide updates as work progresses there. Moving over to the Highway 5 Coquihalla, we know it will be some time before we see traffic on that very important corridor where we fully understand how important the Coquihalla is to our province for east-west travel, and in particular for the movement of goods. Work is getting underway on temporary repairs and construction access that will allow traffic to start moving, and while plans are also being prepared for permanent rebuilds at multiple sites, we don't yet have clear timelines there beyond many weeks for the temporary work and many, many months for the permanent repairs. But I hope to be able to provide a little more clarity on this situation in the coming days. Vancouver Island, all routes are open now. The sinkhole on Highway 19 just north of Nanaimo was repaired on Saturday evening to a degree that allows traffic to get through. Further work continues there, and as traffic continues to flow well on the Malahat, albeit at a slower pace, as crews will remain on site doing more repair work for quite some time. And I would actually direct your attention to the Malahat. It has been flowing in both directions. It has been working very well, but we had a truck collision with a median barrier there. And again, it's a reminder, drive to conditions, drive slowly, because we've had to close that highway to get that truck taken off the road. Let me just say in closing, there's no question we have a lot of work ahead. There's also no question how much people have been doing day and night to get things moving again in our highway. We have 250 pieces of heavy equipment mobilized, working on emergency repairs on our highway network throughout the province. Essential goods and services are moving again, and every day brings us a little bit closer to a return to normal, but we're in the midst of a tremendous challenge, and I want to extend my thanks and appreciation to literally hundreds of British Columbians, thousands, who've decided to roll up their sleeves, who are working alongside all of the different agencies in this response. And I will now hand things over to Minister Popham to provide her update.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thanks to everyone who's joining us today. Well, we're about a week in, and I can tell you that our agricultural community is absolutely exhausted. They're tired. They're working 24 hours a day. There's a lot of pressure on them right now, but I can tell you that the messages of support from British Columbians is making a big difference. They know you've got their back, and so keep those messages coming in to support the agricultural community. A weekend, we've made just about 1,000 points of contact with people involved in food producing in the flood-affected areas, and that's including our daily video calls. This is going to continue. We've had excellent connections with rancher Julia Smith in Merritt, who's working with my assistant deputy, Arif Lalani, passing on important information in that area. Kevin Boone and the BC Cattlemen's Association continue to be a valuable partner and are keeping us apprised of the situation in the interior. Harvey Sasaki, the chair of the Chicken Marketing Board, and Jeremy Dunn, the executive director of the BC Dairy Association, have also been working very closely with us, and we appreciate that very much. You may have seen a story coming out of the Nicola Valley of some horses being rescued. I'd like to thank the BC Horse Council for stepping up. Horses were found to have no food and water. They had no shelter. They were sedated. They were put into feed bags, and they were helicoptered out of that area. And from all reports, they're doing well. So thank you to everyone who participated there. Emergency feed continues to get through. Yesterday, we were able to do that by ground, and this is very good news. A feed storage site has been set up in Abbotsford, and we've made excellent progress securing a stable grain supply through the cooperative efforts of all levels of government. This is going to be significant as we are able to keep livestock fed in the days ahead. We've begun ministry certification to help farmers, vets, and anyone supporting the flood response from an agricultural perspective to ensure that they are exempt from the fuel restrictions that are in place. Under the order, agricultural and farm use vehicles and veterinarians supporting the flood response are considered essential. Agricultural operators who use unmarked or private vehicles and require unrestricted access to fuel can request a permit from the ministry and have access to the fuel that they need. Very important as well, Highway 1 between Whatcom and Cole Road exits is scheduled to open a priority agricultural vehicles lane at noon today. This is great because it gives us another way of accessing the Sumas Prairie and allowing trucks to go down through Cole Road. This will ease some of the access permit requests coming in from farmers as they try and continue to get back to their farms. Our food supply chain remains in good shape as retailers and distributors are working really closely to keep the product moving and supply communities across the province. I'd really like to thank Save on Foods and Buy Low Foods who have worked with the province on emergency food distribution and impacted communities to quickly adjust their distribution networks in Edmonton and Calgary to supply food to smaller communities in need. So thank you so much for that. We know that the impacts from the flooding is having a profound impact on the agriculture sector, and we've made mental health supports available. This is really difficult times. I think I mentioned yesterday there's a lot of young folks involved in agriculture out in the valley, and they're feeling the pain right now, and so we're making sure that they've got the supports they need. It's a very emotional time. On a note, or more like a request, we do have folks out in the valley that are volunteering with their power boats, and we really appreciate these efforts. They're hauling things back and forth. They're allowing farmers to get into areas that are cut off, but we are also requesting that people watch their speed. The wake from those speed boats is affecting the farms that they're passing. We have one farm, a poultry farm, whose transformer is being affected by wake every time a boat goes by, and they're really the transformers are already compromised, and so if they lose this transformer, it's going to take down another few barns that have power right now. So we really appreciate your help, but if you could just keep the boat speed down, that would be fantastic. And then finally, we are making plans to get on the ground this week. We really wanted to make sure that we didn't get in the way and that we weren't taking away resources that were needed, but we expect to be hitting the ground in the Fraser Valley and doing an aerial view of other impacted areas soon. Thank you very much.
A reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Our first question today goes to Camille Baines, Canadian Press.
Hi, this is for Minister Farnworth. I'm wondering about the Nooksack River issue and Washington State. Has the province been in any talks with officials in Washington State about the current impact of that river here?
We are in contact with Washington State about weather conditions and flooding conditions, both of us working together to keep each other informed. the Nooksack River is a particularly challenging issue and has been for a very long time. But I can tell you that not only are we in communication with Washington State, but they have been assisting us as well. And so that cooperation will continue.
Camille, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. How do you expect the federal government here to respond to Washington State about this long-time issue on that river, as you say, so that we don't find ourselves in the same situation the next time? You know, we rebuild the dike, and what happens after that?
Obviously, there is going to be a significant rebuilding that has to take place after this event, and it's going to involve, you know, not just our roads, but our dikes and our drainage and our pumping capacity, all of those things. And I fully expect that there will be engagement required between the federal government and the government of the United States. But what I can tell you is this. This is not a simple problem. This is a very complex problem. If it was simple, it would have probably been dealt with a very long time ago. But the reality is we know that this is an area that is a challenge in terms of flooding, and whenever an event like this continues or happens. And I can tell you that you know, the province and Washington State are committed to working with each other, and I fully expect the federal government to be engaged as well.
Next question, Maria Weisgarber, CTV.
Oh, hi there. Just a question for Minister Fleming first. You mentioned, of course, that goods are now starting to move again throughout the South Coast in BC, and the Trucking Association has said that as well. But I'm wondering if you could speak to sort of managing the expectations of maybe consumers and maybe even retailers about the how quickly things are going to be moving, considering all the work that has yet to be done, and also with the loss of the Coca-Cola for the next several weeks.
Yeah, thank you. And so we're working with retailers, we're working with all levels of government on the supply chain shortages that we're experiencing. And obviously the fuel issue is one where we have brought in measures that are both on the demand side with the 30-liter restriction, rationing gas, and prioritizing emergency vehicles and other things that are necessary for the recovery, and, by the way, the movement of goods. So having commercial vehicles have priority access through cardlock stations to gas helps us get our food and all those things that are currently strained under the supply chain challenges moving again. So Highway 3 was critically important Friday. That's been very well utilized. Goods are on the move there. We do have reports that relaxations by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol in coordination with CBSA is helping get goods moving in transit back into the other parts of the province from the Lower Mainland. As I said a few minutes ago too, the CP Rail update is very encouraging. 2/3 of containers are moved by rail in this province, so that will be a significant addition to the goods movement in the province of BC. But that's the priority. We're looking at other ways. We obviously have passenger vehicles and small vehicles prioritized on Highway 99, but I know that there's deliveries of items that are in short supply in communities that are serviced by that highway as well.
Do you have a follow-up, Maria?
I do. I have a question for a colleague, likely for Minister Farnworth. How quickly is the government able to develop a response plan if Environment Canada implements a category system for atmospheric rivers? And will that help you use the Alert Ready app when required?
We are very pleased that the federal government is putting in place, is working on with Environment Canada a ranking system for the atmospheric rivers. That will assist, I think, us greatly in getting an understanding of exactly what the nature of an atmospheric river is. I mean, it is obviously it is a new term that I think most of us are now becoming familiar with, and they have a ranking system in the States that will allow us to, I think, prepare more effectively. And my expectation is from what I've been told, is that will be coming, looking to be implemented at the beginning of January 2022.
Next question goes to Belle Puri, CBC.
Minister Farnworth, you mentioned in your initial comments about support for Indigenous communities, but what's your response to the criticism that's coming from these communities in the storm-affected areas that they weren't given any warning and they couldn't get their people to safety? Will you be apologizing to these communities for the delay in communication?
As I said right from the beginning of this, this was an unprecedented natural disaster that hit this province. And we have been moving as quickly as we can to respond to the needs, both in terms right from the get-go on the Sunday in terms of evacuating people who were trapped, and then to assess damage and to ensure that critical supplies were able to get to communities, First Nations communities. We've been working very closely with the First Nations Health Authority and the finesse to ensure that we're able to do that very quickly with the federal government and their military capability to assist in getting to supplies to communities. So we are working very closely, ensuring that at reception centers, for example, in Kamloops, that they are First Nations present there to be able to provide culturally appropriate and safe supports and places.
Belle, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, the people on the Sumas Prairie, and most of them don't have insurance because they can't get it. They know they live in a flood zone. But now they're saying they don't think they will qualify for government funding either. So what will be done financially to help these people rebuild, given it could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars to do so?
We are well aware of the situation regarding, in particular, flood insurance and the damage that's taken place. It is going to take a significant rebuilding effort, and we know that government is going to be a significant part of the rebuilding that takes place. There will be those with flood insurance, and there will be those without. Right now, our focus is ensuring that those people have the supports that they need. And that, as I've said in my comments, I will have further information on additional supports that will be available to them. There are also the disaster finance programs that have been at the federal level that have been declared. That's already in place. And of course, we are obviously going to recognize that there are going to be situations that are outside the norm, and government's going to need to be responsive to.
Next question, Richard Zussman, Global News.
Minister Farnworth, can you give us an update on the gas supply issue? Did you get any update from the companies over the weekend in terms of how much gas was purchased? Are there still issues with supply? May there have to be amendments made to the order? And would you consider, some people have proposed the idea that the province should make transit free for everyone, public transit free during the gas rationing period. Is that something the province would consider?
So what I can tell you at this point in time is that everything that Trans Mountain is working round the clock to ensuring the pipeline and its ability to move product is done as quickly and as safely as possible. We have been sourcing a supply from other jurisdictions, as you know, Alberta, for example, and then also from south of the border. I can tell you that there are some barges that are actually on the way to get here with fuel, so that is underway. In terms of the gas supply, we are confident that there's enough gasoline, that people are doing the right thing. I know that, for example, I was out in my own community of Port Coquitlam this weekend. The Costco was busy. It was a typical Sunday busy. Other gas stations that I passed by just had a few vehicles. There were no signs of lineups or panic buying. So we're confident that the measures that have been put in place are working and that people are doing the right thing.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
Would the province consider making public transit free during this period of time where rationing is being asked for until December 1st? And also for Minister Fleming, could you give us an update? I know you mentioned some time frames on Highway 1. Can you talk about how quickly we may be able to open that stretch up leading more towards Chilliwack, or is it too variable now with the weather systems coming later this week?
With regards to transit, I can tell you we're looking at, at that 9 days for the issue around gas. And what we've seen is people are doing the right thing. People are taking transit. People are monitoring their trips. And we're going to get through this. And we think the measures that we have in place at this time are the appropriate ones that will see us through to the 1st of December.
If you'd like to defer to, Minister Fleming first.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just add on to Richard's question about transit. The most... Highway 1, rather. So as I mentioned earlier, the stretch in the most affected area still remains underwater. Some assessments have been done about the condition of the road. Where we've been able to open up Highway 1 again, in Chilliwack and east of Chilliwack to Bridal Falls, we've been pleasantly surprised that the road is in good condition, so it's been able to be reopened. It's in use now. There are no travel restrictions there, but we ask people to travel judiciously, not take unnecessary trips and not contribute to unnecessary congestion there. But it's too early. I will commit to an update as soon as I have one, but it's too early in terms of a timeline on when all of Highway 1 is going to be reopened through the Fraser Valley.
Now, next question, we go to Lisa Eustace, City News.
Good morning, ministers. I'm just wondering, and it's sort of following up on something someone else asked. Last week when we asked about this, it was very clear that the government said that it's local governments that were responsible for communicating, anything to do with weather. But this weekend, it was very noticeable that the province sent out a weather warning with the rains coming, which are far less substantial than what came a week ago. So that seems like a change in tone, and I'm wondering, does this mean that the province has realized that there is a greater role for the province to play in these situations and not just leave it all to local governments and drive BC?
What we're wanting to do, and given the event that we've seen, which as you know is absolutely unprecedented, that we've received the flood warnings, we received stream flow warnings, we received weather advisories. They're going out they go up on Drive BC, they go up on the highway signs and such like, and we want to make sure that there is a wide distribution of information for people. It's not about local communities are managing the issues on the ground, and particularly given the fact that right now the latest weather warning is about rain coming through, and the ground is particularly saturated. That makes it a much more challenging situation.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Being that this is the third of the unprecedented events this year, can we expect going forward that this is the kind of response like what we saw this weekend with the weather coming, and with now there are signs on the highway and there were not last weekend, a lot of the digital signs, that we can expect, I guess, a more preemptive response from the province to give a provincial-wide warnings versus just relying on the local governments, that this is a shift in how things will be handled going forward?
I mean, we always want to make sure we have the best information available, and that's why when I said, I was asked earlier about the ranking system for atmospheric rivers, which, as I said, is a term that I think most of us are only just getting to really understand what that means. The fact that Environment Canada is working on a ranking system that will allow us to have a better understanding of exactly what is going to be taking place, I think is extremely important, and it will help us improve not just our notification but our response, and help local governments too, which are on the ground at that front line. So all of that is important. It also is one of the reasons, I have also repeatedly said on a number of occasions why it's so important that the work that we are currently undertaking and have been undertaking around a complete revamp and overhaul of the Emergency Program Act, so that disaster management doesn't just focus on response, but it focuses on prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery, and does so under a comprehensive framework. And that's why I've mentioned the Sendai framework a number of times. So all of those things are important, and that will lead us to be able to deal better with these kinds of events, because, as we know, climate change is here, and I think what we saw over this past weekend is obviously a result of that.
Next question, Colton Davies, Radio NL.
Just wanting to know how long travel restrictions might be remaining in place between the southern interior and the south coast, and if people should be expecting those restrictions to stay in place over the holiday season at this point. And also in that breath, wondering if temporary repairs to either Highway 1 through the Fraser Canyon or the Coquihalla Highway south of Merritt may be ready before, again, the holiday season.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Colton. So on Highway 5, we'll have an update about the Coquihalla in the coming days, and it will have a timeline and some background on the engineering assessment and what we propose as a temporary fix versus a long-term rebuild that takes into account the need to make that infrastructure sustainable and resilient. So that will be in the coming days. With regards to Highway 3, let's just deal with that and the restrictions. Those restrictions need to be in place right now. Those restrictions were there to prioritize people that were stranded from their homes to return to their principal residences, and also to get much needed goods on the move into the southern interior and the north of the province. So we'll have an update daily, but we've always anticipated that those restrictions are in place as they are needed. So they will be lifted when they are no longer needed, but it's too early right now. We've only had that road open on Friday. We're trying to eliminate the bottleneck of that has clogged our supply chains when it was unable to be connected, and so that remains the priority at this time.
Colton, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Thank you, and thanks for that answer. Also curious, too, with the non-essential travel restrictions, with the road checks that were in place, how many non-essential travelers were turned around at the road checks on the weekend? And I know Minister Farnworth had mentioned the possibility of fines, and I wouldn't suspect any were issued, but I'm curious if any were.
To my knowledge, British Columbians followed the orders very well. They're putting their fellow British Columbians first. They understand who is a priority and who isn't, and to my knowledge, no fines were issued by the RCMP on Highway 3, and Minister Farnworth may have something to add. Okay, that is the update from how the weekend went. So there was presence there, but there was no need for enforcement.
Next question goes to Kat Slepian, Black Press. Kat, are you there?
Sorry, I just had my mute on. So the federal government said on Sunday that there are about 500 troops in BC, largely in kind of the Fraser Valley area. What particularly are those troops doing in the eastern Fraser Valley? And does the province anticipate needing more military aid in the coming days and weeks?
Yeah, the troops that we received from the Fraser Valley are doing a variety of tasks, some logistical. Obviously, others we've seen them out helping to breach some of the dikes and strengthening those dikes, and also delivering supplies to communities in different parts, in particular on the canyon. So there's a significant amount of work that's being done. And the federal government has been very responsive in that matter, and basically whatever we've asked for, they've been able to supply. And I think things are very much working as they're supposed to right now.
Do you have a follow-up, Kat?
I do. This one's from Minister Popham, I suppose. We know that there were thousands of heads of cattle and other livestock on Sumac Prairie when it flooded, some of which were unfortunately not able to be saved. Are there any sort of plans going forward in terms of removing those remains and any sort of other kind of agricultural or biological, I guess, waste on the Sumac Prairie going forward?
Thanks for the question. So I'll just add to one of the jobs that the military is assisting with. They are also moving live chickens from some barns into safer barns, and so we really appreciate the help that they've given us there. We do have a plan around disposal of carcasses, and that's ongoing. We're working closely with the agricultural associations to understand their needs and to we're also working with local government on capacity in landfills and possible incineration areas. And so, yeah, that's underway. We're currently seeing too much water to really address that part right now, but the temperatures are cool, and so we've got a bit of time to try and get that going. But the planning is definitely underway.
Next question, Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you. Minister Farnworth, you talked about the response in aiding First Nations communities, but some First Nations say they received flood warning alerts late or not at all. And the First Nations Emergency Society said there are communications problems with local emergency systems, and they don't feel like they are a full partner with the EMBC. What communications problems have been identified by your emergency response people when it comes to alerts to First Nations?
Whenever there's well, first we want to make sure that First Nations are full partners in terms of emergency management and Emergency BC. It's one of the reasons why, in terms of the new Emergency Program Act that will be coming into place, there is significant work underway with First Nations to make sure that they are involved and that they are able, that we are able to put in place, have legislation that deals with their needs and in accordance with the UNDRIP principles. That being said, when there was in the nature of this particular event that it unfolded, our job was to ensure that notifications to affected communities, once we became aware of the scope of the disaster that unfolded, particularly in the canyon, was as quick as possible. That's why the first priority obviously was rescuing people. It was to also, in terms of the response of getting supplies flown in. One of the things we obviously want to do when this event is over is to look at where there were gaps and make sure that we're able to address those gaps.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. I want to switch the focus a bit to the Wet'suwet'en territory. The situation seems to be escalating. The Haida Nation, for example, is promising to, quote, send people and resources in the coming days. Do you expect that we will see that situation escalate and that protests, might be extended to, similar to what we saw in the past where rail lines were blocked across the country? I'm wondering what steps are being taken to deal with that.
Obviously, it's our hope that escalation does not take place. What we want is for people to be calm, and that the issue around the injunction that is in place and the enforcement that has taken place is done by the RCMP, and it is an injunction that is put in place by the courts. We have been doing, as you know, a significant amount of work over the last number of months to try and de-escalate tensions in the area, and so it is my hope that is still the route that will be taken.
Next question, April Lawrence, Czech News.
Oh, hi, thank you so much. Minister Farnworth, I'm wondering if I can get your thoughts on David Suzuki's comment over the weekend about pipelines being blown up if action isn't taken on climate change, and just how concerned you are that people might actually take action into their own hands after hearing that.
I think statements like that are not helpful. I think that, that's just not helpful at all. What I can tell you in terms of climate change and climate action, this government takes that very seriously. That's why we have a very solid climate action plan that we are working very hard on to implement. It's a plan that, on the basis of Clean Energy BC, worked with the former leader of the Green Party on, Dr. Andrew Weaver. That's the direction forward. That's the way that we're going to address climate change, not by making statements that will alarm people or cause concern. So, I heard that and it's like, that is not helpful at all. And especially at a time when we have a province that thousands of individuals have been displaced. Everybody is pulling together to get us through this weather catastrophe. I think that's what British Columbians want to see. And that's the message that British Columbians want to hear, is that we are all, as a society, doing everything we can to deal with the situation that we're currently facing.
April, do you have a follow-up?
I do. You mentioned the heavy rainfall that's expected in the days or even weeks ahead. I'm just wondering what your message is to British Columbians who are already dealing with flooding or who may have to travel on roads or highways where there could yet again be a risk of mudslides.
The message is really clear. If you don't have to travel, don't travel. Pay attention to Drive BC, pay attention to weather warnings, because the weather is dynamic. The weather does fluctuate. And we are monitoring that on a daily basis and regular communication with Environment Canada. And so, you know, over the coming weeks, and it is winter, we just need to be as prepared as you can be, and that people should always check before they go out on the road. And the reality is this: if you don't have to travel for non-essential purposes, particularly long distances, then don't. There are highway restrictions in place. You know, stay local, help your friends, help your neighbors if they need to go shopping, do a couple of trips, carpool, those kind of things. That's what British Columbians need to do. And from what we've seen so far, that's what British Columbians are doing.
Next question goes to Peter Mitham, Country Life.
Good morning. I believe Minister Popham had said on Friday that there were 959 farms on evacuation order and a further 164 or so on evacuation alert. So just wanted to get an update as we're preparing to go to press on the Premises ID program and just how that's been facilitating re-access to properties, especially where we know from past events that some of the people on the ground have had difficulty getting back to their properties due to conflicting information and so forth. And also, Premises ID is supposed to be giving weather alerts, so I was just wondering if there's any progress on that for the coming week.
Thank you, Peter. Good to hear from you. So Premises ID has been a very, very important program. It has been in the past a voluntary program where we are able to have people register with their farm address and the number of animals that they have on the premise. This has been allowing us to track numbers of animals in the locations where there's evacuation notices. So that information has been useful. Of course, as people want to get back into their farms, there's other things that have to be considered, like the safety of the road. And so I think on balance, the Premises ID has been working, but in an emergency, you know, there's high emotions and there's a lot of frustrating situations. We're working with local governments as well. So I think on the whole, it's working well, but every time we go through something like this, we've mostly had experience with wildfire and Premises ID, so we'll be looking at how it worked with this flood situation, and there's always room for improvement, but I think it was working fine.
Peter, do you have a follow-up?
That's good segue to the follow-up question, actually. Many of the reporters here have been asking about these unprecedented situations and the responses to them, and bearing in mind that we have had experience with wildfire but also flood in the past, just wanted to know if there were any learnings that Minister Farnworth or Minister Popham want to comment on from the Abbott-Chapman report from the flood and fire season of 2017 or the floods that ripped through Grand Forks in 2018. Because these seem to be precedents, and there's only so far, it seems, before unprecedented becomes the new normal.
No, thank you for that question. And you're right. We have seen, you know, and I hate using that word unprecedented, but over the last few years, I mean, communities in this province have seen, you know, some pretty devastating blows. I think of Merritt, for example, evacuations under fire and evacuations under floods. The reality is this: We know that climate change is upon us. We know that there are more and more of these events happening. It's why the lessons that we learn in terms of Abbott Chapman, a lot of those have already been actioned, and work is being implemented and is being done on implementing all of them. That work is underway. It's also why in 2017, shortly after taking over this portfolio, I was approached by one of my deputies to talk about the Sendai framework and what it would mean to being prepared for emergencies in the future. It's why we became the first province in the country after the federal government to sign up to that framework. It's why that's the approach that we're taking in terms of the Emergency Program Act that's having its first real overhaul since about 1993, because we need to not just, as I said earlier, be reacting in terms of responding to an emergency, but rather we need to take an approach that's based on the four pillars of Sendai, which is prevention, which is mitigation, which is response, and which is recovery, and building back better. It's why you saw some of the lessons that we've learned from Grand Forks, which was don't just build back in the place that got flooded, but look, is there an opportunity to relocate? All of these kinds of things are going to have to play into how we manage disasters and how we respond to disasters and how we prepare for disasters in the future. And so that work has been underway, and that's why I view that legislation coming next year as critically important, along with other improvements that we will see in the months ahead of that. That's why I'm really pleased around the issue of the ranking system for atmospheric rivers. That will help us immensely. So there's been a lot of work underway. There will be a lot more work that happens, and obviously after each and every one of these things there are lessons that have to be learned, and lessons that need to be, and those lessons need to be incorporated into future plans.
Next question, we go to Barbara Roden, Ashcroft Journal.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Barbara. Go ahead. You may now be on mute, Barbara. We could hear you the first time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. This is from Minister Farnworth. Minister Farnworth, what do you have to say to the people of Lytton who have been waiting 5 months since their community burned to the ground and are now beginning to despair that with efforts concentrated on rebuilding in Abbotsford and Merritt, they are going to get pushed even further down the list?
They are absolutely not being pushed further down on the list. The team that is placed, that is working with the community of Lytton, continues to work with the community of Lytton. Lytton is still very much front and center, as are all the other communities that we are working with. But I absolutely want to assure you that the plan that was presented, the supports that were in place, the work that's underway, the staff that are there assisting, continue to do just that. And there is absolutely no thought of Lytton getting pushed down.
Barbara, do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question today, and we go to Mike Hager, Globe and Mail. Mike, please go ahead.
Thanks so much. Just wanted you to clarify your comments on the Nooksack. So what have you been told is the risk that it'll flood north again this week? And then just an update on where Merritt and Princeton are, how many people remain evacuated?
So in terms of the Nooksack, what we have, the word we have received from Environment Canada at the latest is that they are not looking at the Nooksack overflowing or flooding this coming week. So that's what I can tell you there. In terms of Merritt, right now there's been significant work done on the water treatment plant, that it is up and will be able to be online. There's significant work taking place around the water safety issue in terms of when people can go back. So when the flood situation happened and the evacuation system situation happened in Merritt, it was on the basis of part of Merritt was flooded, and then the other part was evacuated because of the water treatment system. Now that is going to be able to be brought back online, that will allow for the people in the non-flooded area to be able to return back to their homes. That work is still underway. Not able to give a firm date or firm time at this point, but I can tell you that we are getting close in that regard. In terms of Princeton, The power has been restored. The natural gas supply has been restored. There were about 1,150 homes that were impacted. Just over 1,000 have now been reconnected. The ones that weren't, and I think there was about 130, were because either A, they weren't home, or B, because there was damage to the particular property. So that's what I can give you in regard to those two communities. In terms of evacuation orders right now you're still looking at around 14,000 people impacted. That has not changed much over the last few days, but I expect that that will, if there is a partial lifting of an evacuation order in Merritt, and obviously the same in Princeton.
Mike, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think late last week you said the 2 journalists arrested at the Wet'suwet'en protests were released, and they're still at a bail hearing today, is my understanding. Can you explain what happened there?
The information that I gave last week was the information that I had at that particular time. I do know that there are two journalists who have been detained. Whether they're the same as the other 2 I referenced, that I am not sure. But obviously, a free press is critical to our society and our democratic process. The RCMP, I expect, will have more to say on that later today. And as you said, it is also the matter is also being before the courts as we speak right now.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's update.